All right, good evening, everyone. Without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and get us started tonight. Um, Tonight's workshop is just a lot of information around retirement, long-term financial planning, different things like that that can help you just on your journey. If everyone can hear me and see my screen, could anyone just let me know just to make sure?
Yes, I can
Thank you.
see you and hear you, see your
Thank you.
screen and everything. Good afternoon. Good evening, brother.
Thank you. So
You.
go ahead and get started. So I wanted to start off with this quote this time. True wealth is built not from how much you earn, but how much you keep. Most importantly, as well, how much you grow. This quote just stands out to me because a lot of people, when we think about the wealthy individuals in today's time, a lot of them have not only become wealthy, but they've also found ways to keep their wealth and grow their wealth. And we can do the same, and that's just the reasoning behind that quote for us tonight. Um, this is the third workshop, so just make this really brief. But for anyone who maybe didn't attend the first two and attending this one, just a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in a town called South Boston, Virginia. I attended Old Dominion University. Married, father of three children. I've been attending Abyssinia since 2008. Worked in banking for 14 years. Currently a branch manager. And I have a passion for just helping people by providing advice and guidance, and helping them achieve whatever financial goals, that they may have. All right. So just some current financial landscape. According to Vanguard, 50% of American households are at risk of not maintaining their pre-retirement standard of living. 72% of Americans
Eight, eight,
are
eight,
worried
eight, nine, 885.
higher taxes will eat away at their retirement.
Mm.
So very, very, concerning stats when we think about, just the economic environment. There's a lot of fear around, with the administration, Social Security, different things like that. How long would these avenues be available? And it's a concern that a lot of people have, just what would retirement look like for me? This slide right here, I want to bring this slide in, your net worth number. Very interesting, piece of information I found just in research and preparation for this. But it just talks about, your net worth number, just has some details about where you may rank. I found it very interesting that, it tells you how many adults, if you look at the top. So 1.5 billion adults in this bracket, their net worth is $100 or less. It says very little. This categories include people with negative net worth, so poor. On a rich person's bad day, your assets or your liabilities are exceeding your assets, and that's what net worth is. For anyone who's not aware, it's your assets minus your liabilities equals your net worth. So you would add up, everything that you have, that's an asset, house, car, retirement account, and you would subtract out any liabilities, such as if you have a car payment, if you have, mortgage, that's technically a liability, even though your house is the asset, different things like that, and then you would get your net worth. And reason I like this chart as well, it on the right hand side, it kind of gives you, the when we get to look at level number three, we have 1,000, that's 1.7 billion. Those people have enough to cover a small emergency, and that's the median American renter. So that's right there is just an idea of where you stand. I mean, you have level four, we'll go down to that. Your net income would be 10,000, which is 1.3 billion individuals, and that puts you in the category for a new car. So very interesting, information, and it kind of goes all the way up to the very bottom, which is number 11, which is 100 billion net worth, and that is space travel. And it even has some names in there just for aspiration. Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates. It says those two, but there's definitely other individuals who are in that same category net worth.
Believers and partners that grow in the word. So you already know what you should be doing right now. Listen, you ought to be sharing
The
right now.
next thing is calculating how much you need. So that's always a big question when we talk about retirement,
That's
exactly how much money
to
will
the
you
word of
need
God.
to retire?
But I've been
That's the
blessed
number
by
one question everyone seems to ask. Question everyone tries to ponder when you're considering retirement. How much money do I
If you
need?
missed any of the
So
sermon,
right here, it just has three ideas that you can
five,
use
I
to
would
figure out
encourage
how
you to
much that
go back
money is.
into the last couple so you can get
Give me 1
caught
second just to
and pick
mute
back up
everyone.
with us this week as we continue to push forward in our series, and we're learning valuable life principles as believers. How you and I can live out our faith in a culture that is always seeking to compromise. And so I encourage you to go back and listen to the playback.
All right, sorry about that. Just want to get everyone clear. So the first is 12 years of pre-retirement income. So this guideline suggests that saving 12 times your annual pre-retirement salary. For example, if you make 100,000 per year, your goal would be to have 1.2 million saved, invested. Um, in Investopedia suggests that specific saving milestones by age, such as having 3 times your salary saved by 40, 6 times by 50, 8 times by 60. So for this category, that's how you would come up with, how much you would possibly need to retire. And of course, it's based on how much income. But just to run that down for you again, if you make 100,000 per year, that would be 1.2 million that you would want to be saved. And of course, that's including, retirement accounts. I know sometimes saving goals seems very lofty, but if you do have, 401k, TSP for those may have been in the military before, it is including the assets that you've accumulated there as well. The next is the 4% rule, which gets a little bit tricky to calculate. But with that one, essentially, you would say, just say it really has you withdrawing 4% of your retirement per year and costing for inflation. So in the first year, you would take 4% and just say your retirement savings is 700,000, at the end of your time. That means your withdrawal amount for that year would be 28,000. And then every year, what you would do is possibly add like 1% for inflation. So the next year it'd be 29,000. The year after that, it'd be 30,000. But with that calculation, it essentially has 4% that you would just draw down off of your retirement. And ideally, your retirement is growing at a rate where you won't, just drain it all the way down. And then we have 1 million, which is as easy as it sounds, not easy, but it's that explanation is as easy as it sounds, which is just, obtaining like 1 million. And like I said, that sounds very, you know, probably out of reach, but you have to consider too, your retirement. And then, if you're married, that kind of impacts that as well, that number, or different people who live in the home, that impacts the number as well. But just kind of give you an idea of, what is that number? There's also a ton of calculators as well that you could use. A lot of people, if you have a 401k, they usually have a retirement calculator built in right in there that you could use to calculate how much you would possibly need. So this next slide, just want to kind of run down according to AARP, some of the top 10 expenses and just a little bit more information that people run into in retirement. For those already in retirement, I'm sure you already know, but for those of us who, still have a lot of work to do before we get there, just some things to consider, as you transition toward that period. So number one is healthcare. The average 65-year-old retiring in 2024 will spend 165,000 on healthcare and medical treatments through the rest of their life, according to the Fidelity Investment Study. So that's a lot of money, and you have to consider that, if you are working currently and you do have, health insurance through your job, once you retire from that job, you no longer have health insurance. And then depending on your age, will just determine, whether you fall into the Medicare, Medicaid category. So, definitely a big expense to consider when you talk about retirement. And, that's why a lot of people go get like a part-time job or something like that just to have some type of relief on those benefits. but that is the number one expense. Think about it as well. You're getting older, so different issues may come up, medication, different things like that. Number two is home maintenance and modifications. I think that one goes just without saying for those of us who own a home, just the upkeep, whether that's, and especially if you've been in your home for a long time, you have roof, may need to remodel. One thing they talked about in there as well is, updating your home to, fit your needs. So as you get older, if your, bedroom is on the second floor, maybe you have to move it down to the first floor just so you don't have to go up and down the steps so much. Home, bathroom, different things like that may need to be modified as well. Number three is home insurance and car insurance. Reviewing how much coverage you need, especially in multi-car families. Some of the savings come from scaling back to collision only coverage on older vehicles. Also looking to bundle home and car insurance can help a lot. Many places offer discounts if you do that, but that's also one as well that can catch you if you're not prepared for it. Next is travel. I know everybody has the aspiration to, once they retire, usually you want to do that traveling. So travel costs and retirement will vary based on where you go and where you stay, and also who you bring along. That's one thing I read as well. Typically, you should plan to travel much more in your early years and much less in your later years. But when we talk about who you bring along, one thing it talked about as well, if you bring a family along, or do you have to cover any of those expenses? As opposed to one person going, dinner is, $30, $40. If you go with a group, that could easily, balloon up. So really considering, all the expenses before you do travel. The next one is transportation, which that's just getting from point A to point B. The next one, utilities. Utilities is one of the few expenses that should head south in retirement, just because you shouldn't, things kind of scale down. Use temperature, thermostat, different things like that. They kind of scale down, once you kind of move into that retirement. Another big expense, kids and grandkids can definitely be an expense in retirement. Has that here new grandparents tend to overspend on the first child. Then when the next, child or children come along, they feel obligated to match their generosity, even if they can no longer afford it. So for a lot of those with grandchildren, you think about you probably had the first one when you were working, had more consistent income. Now, third, fourth, fifth, sixth comes along and you're no longer working. Just being wise about, the spending in those situations. Next would be taxes. You can't avoid taxes, but you can't strategize to minimize them in retirement. Everything I researched and talked about, planning ahead is key. There's a lot of information about diversifying your savings. For example, splitting up between traditional Roth, maybe just a cash brokerage account, because all of those are taxed differently. So when you get in retirement, you can look at the situation that you're in and figure out what's the best way to retrieve those funds for whatever purchase you're looking to make. And staying connected is just reaching out, having your phone, cell phone plan, whether you have to have some type of app just to communicate, whether that's to family, friends, because most everything now is done by phone digitally, to stay connected, but that's another expense that's incurred. Also retirement debt management, as a rule of thumb, no more than 36% of your pre-tax income should be used to manage your debt payments, including your home, credit cards, car loan, and line of credit. One thing I'll tell you is that, as you look around, and looking for different information, you can find a lot of different stats, a lot of different percentages to support whichever end of the spectrum you would like to be on. But the one thing I would recommend everyone to do is pick a strategy and start with that and just do your best to execute on it. But we've talked about different ways in the first one just to manage that and different percentages and different ideas that you can use. And to me, the idea that you choose is not as important as the execution. So the execution is what is important when we talk about how to manage your debt and your different expenses. So debt management, just some ideas we have, prioritizing your debt repayment, decide which debts to tackle first, whether you're using the avalanche or snowball method, which if you have any questions about those or what exactly that is, if you go back to the first session that we had, which is on the church's YouTube, you will be able to see that. Just a quick recap with the debt avalanche, you pay down balances with the highest APR first. With the debt snowball method, you pay down balances from from smallest to largest, excuse me, regardless of the interest. For those who have, a lot of creditors and not sure, a lot of bills out there, some creditors will negotiate. It's always a big question when it comes to credit, is that okay? I always, say it starts with just paying the bill. Second, if you can't pay the bill, then the next is, negotiating some type of settlement. And then lastly is just not paying the bill. So it is better to negotiate and settle than just not pay the bill, because usually settling will kind of stop the hit on your credit and let you begin to transition away from it. Where if it stays open and just unpaid, it's always an open impact and you're not beginning to move away from it. Goes without saying, cut unnecessary expenses. Like I said in the first one, we talked about different ways you can do that, going back to your bank statement, looking for different avenues that some things that you need, are you still paying for them? And increasing income, opportunities for additional income through side hustle, skill development. For a lot of people, I said this on the first one as well, when you're in a situation where your budget is just not quite, equaling out or getting you ahead, it's really only one or two options that you have. You either have to find a way to cut expenses or you have to increase your income. And those are the two, avenues for your budget. So next is a question that is always asked. A lot of times, I know a lot of people have heard this terminology, this word, don't know exactly what it means, but trust. So what is like, why should, anyone consider getting the trust? Few reasons. It provides for family members if something happens to you. It dictates the distribution of your assets to specific beneficiaries. It helps transfer highly appreciated assets tax efficiently. It's ensured continued care of a loved one with special needs, insulating the family from wealth, from lawsuits, creditors, and divorce, also leaving a charitable legacy. So just the overall theme of a trust is really it's a entity of its own that holds your assets. So for example, if you have, just say you pass away, you have $1 million, and then somebody comes back from 20 years ago and says, hey, they stepped on my toe and now I saw that they have a lot of money. I want to go ahead and sue them and try to get some of that money that they left behind. Well, the trust is an entity of itself. So then the trust would give you protection from being able to be sued. Give an example, if you go into an establishment, like a McDonald's, somewhere like that, and you slip and fall, you would sue that franchise possibly, but that's still different from being able to access the full net worth of a McDonald's franchise. So yes, you could sue that individual building, but it would only get you so far because McDonald's is, franchise. So the major all company would be safe. And the trust is kind of the same way. It provides you a level of protection from different things that may happen. Also lets you keep control of the assets. I'm sure people know of trust funds where, very wealthy parents may pass away and they may not want the child to just blow through all the money. So then they'll put rules in place such as, you can only have X amount per year, or you need to finish college before you can get X amount. The trust allows you to set those things in place because otherwise the money just flows right down to the individual. And then taxes as well. There are certain points where inheritance become taxed. A lot of times those numbers are large, but also depending on the type of retirement vehicle or the type of wealth vehicle that you're using, it could possibly have them getting taxed earlier, but this protects them, from having to take a full hit of taxes. Two different types of trust. We got a revocable trust and an irrevocable trust. So the revocable trust, the grantor retains control, can modify or revoke the trust. Irrevocable trust, the grantor relinquishes all control and cannot make modify the trust. Just as simply as it sounds, irrevocable, it cannot be changed. When we talk about asset protection, an irrevocable trust is limited protection. Assets are still considered part of the grantor's estate, whereas the irrevocable is strong protection. Assets are removed from the grantor's trust. So, which means there's a harder line for separation when we talk about the irrevocable trust. Flexibility, the revocable trust, since it can be revoked, it's a high flexibility. It can be changed or terminated at any time. The irrevocable trust has low flexibility. It's very difficult to change or terminate once established. And lastly, estate tax. So with the revocable trust, assets in the trust are included in the guarantor's estate for tax purposes. In the irrevocable trust, assets in the trust are generally not included in the guarantor's estate for tax purposes. So as you can see, when you look at this, the revocable trust, a lot of people push for it, talk about it all the time, but it doesn't necessarily provide as strong protection as the irrevocable trust. But then with the irrevocable trust, you can't make as many changes. So what I would say with this, if it's something that, you feel like you need to look into, you want to establish, it's probably best to seek legal advice or, advice from, a financial advisor that can help you determine if it's right for your situation, because different situations will require a different lens to look at this. I will say a lot of trusts, just like a lot of legal documents now, they can, you can usually get the documentation online, and do that. I will tell you, if you do start a trust, it is something where you can transition a lot of accounts that you currently have into a trust. Example, if you do have a checking account, you can just transition that account into a trust versus having to open up everything new. So that is an option. But just if it's something you're interested in, I'll recommend, they have trust attorneys, a lot of virtual attorneys as well. But just reaching out to them to see if it fits, your situation and what protection it would provide. And then also just making sure, if you do decide to go down that road, it's a lot of information about, which avenue is best. So when we talk about retirement legacy planning, last will and testament is something that I recommend that everyone have. But the purpose of a last will and testament is just to ensure that assets are distributed according to the decedent's wishes rather than the state laws. So, for example, if someone passes away, they don't have a will, any type of documentation, it's state specific on what happens. Usually in Virginia, it's like a percentage that goes to the spouse, a percentage that goes to the kids. So, a lot of that can get very dicey, especially if you have a situation where, maybe one of the kids has passed away and now the grandkids now become in line to get entitled to a piece of the pie. And then you figure out, well, okay, now everybody's entitled to the pie. There's usually one or two people left behind trying to fit the bills. And now they're trying to pay for everything, knowing that, everyone else is going to reap the benefits and they probably not going to be reimbursed. So it's of the utmost important that you do have your wishes documented somewhere in the will. Beneficiaries, which is a term used in the will or not, that's the person who inherited the deceased property. The executive is the person appointed to manage the estate and settle the debts. So usually when you have a will, you will appoint someone who is in charge of settling, making sure, give you an example, if you have a grandmother who has, just say three children, and she wants everyone to get a third. Well, what you could do is put one person in charge and just mandate that they give everyone their third. And the reason you may do that is because one of them may live in California, one of them may live in Florida, one of them may live in Virginia. If you put all three of them in charge, they always are going to have to act in unison. So once they go back to living their lives, they're going to have to start figuring out how to, meet up and settle this, versus if you put one person in charge, they can still handle and do everything and they still can, transact on your wishes. So that's, one reason why you may appoint someone to be in charge of your estate. Also recommended, if you do anoint someone to be in charge of your, estate, your last will, is you let them know and just kind of run down everything you have. It's one thing I see a lot in the banks for now, such and such passes away. Now this person is in charge and they have to go to bank to bank to bank trying to figure out, hey, did this person have an account? And I always say the last thing that anyone wants to deal with when you're grieving the loss of a loved one is, finances, trying to figure things out, trying to understand this person's thinking and trying to figure out, why would they have an account over here? What's going on? So it's just the last thing people want to deal with in an agreement situation. Some common mistakes, in the last will and testament, having a child, a partner be a witness. Usually a will require a notary and a witness. You can't have anyone in those positions witness. Making changes after the will has been signed. So usually a will is not a handwritten document. Usually it's a typed document. So changes are very easy to be spotted. And then forgetting assets. So very, very important, if you do have a will, you making sure you update it on some type of regular schedule, whether that's yearly, quarterly, but as the situation changes, it's very, very important that you make those updates. And just to further explain that a little bit, how that process works, when you have a will and then person X passes away and they anoint person Y to be in charge of the will, they would take that will and then they would go to the local courthouse of where the person resided and they will be given a document. The way I explain it, is similar to a power of attorney after you pass. So what it allows you to do is transact on behalf of the individual who passed. So now when you go into the DMV, you go into the mortgage company, you provide them with that document that the court has given you, and now you can begin to, kind of reconcile the affairs that are out there. Maybe it's a home that needs to be sold. Maybe, like I said, it's a car that needs to be retitled. Maybe it's bank accounts that need to be closed. This will allow you to conduct those transactions. Otherwise, we talk about going back to the state law. So now that car has to be split 50-50. Trying to figure that out just sometimes can become a little, difficult, more difficult than it needs to be. Before I start on this slide, I just have, and I'll end with this slide too. I'll end with this phrase in this slide, a call to action. Make sure all your accounts have a POD or TOD and keep a list of those accounts. So what are those? A POD, which is payable upon death. Accounts are typically used for bank accounts like checking and savings. But essentially what that means is when someone passes away, that POD, the money can now go to them. Nice thing about a POD, you can have multiple people there. So if you do want to say, hey, this account, when I pass away, I want to split between A and B, you can do that. And you can put both of them on there. And what will happen is one person come in and get their half, the other person come in and get the other half. Then we have a TOD. TOD is usually used for brokerage accounts or investments like stocks and bonds. TOD, same purpose, is people that's designated that when something happens to you, now they can come in and claim the funds and they get to bypass that, what we call the probate. And it says the next, both allow assets to bypass probate and transfer directly to the name of the beneficiaries upon death. So essentially in this scenario, it will walk in with a death certificate and then the funds will be turned over directly to them. The next one is a joint account holder. So as people, start to get up in age, they look at like, hey, what if I can't come to the bank? What if I don't feel like coming to the bank? What if I want, my daughter to be able to deposit in my account or write a check if something happens to my hand? Some people choose to do a joint account, write a survivorship. Where that is now this person has co-ownership during the lifetime of the account. So one thing I wanted to say, keep in mind that joint account holders require consideration for asset restricted benefits. So Medicare, Medicaid, a lot of times those things have, restrictions on how much you can have assets. And I have run into situations where, mom may not have many assets, maybe below those thresholds, but she has, her son on the account who he is a small business owner and keeps, his accounts well above those limits. Well, now they're asking for the son to verify this, and he ends up usually having to come off of the account. So just keep that in mind. You know, it is a great idea to have somebody on there, because just as somebody who works in the bank, if somebody is not on the account, we really can't help no matter what the situation is. So it is good to have, you know, a co-owner on there, but there's just things you want to consider before adding that person on it. Also, too, the difference between we got the POD and the TOD, the person that's in those spaces, they have no transaction authority until you pass. If you add someone as a joint account, from the minute they sign that paperwork, they have all rights to whatever is available, just the same as you do. So that's anytime I'm doing that for someone, I'm always very clear to explain, you know, hey, once we do this, you know, this person can access this money just like you. There is no, hey, this is mine and they own the account. It is both of you all's. And just to reiterate, a call to action. Any accounts that you have, if there's one thing, you know, from this workshop that you know, would take away, is please go to every account that you have, no matter how big or how small, because you don't know, that account that has very little today in 2 years could have a huge amount in it, and you not come back to think about that. But please add a POD or a transfer on death to your any account that you have. You know, that's another frustrating thing when someone has, you know, 5 accounts, got a POD, and then they got 3 accounts that don't have anyone on it. So now, you know, it's just more unnecessary paperwork. How you can do these things, some banks have them so you can do it online. When we talk about TOD and the brokerage, usually you have to reach out to your advisor. If you're using things like Robinhood and different portals like that, usually you can just add it on through the app for your checking and savings. If you don't see, you can always walk into your institution and just get the directions and what information you would need. But that would be the one thing I would say, if out of all the information that we're covering, you know, that would be something that I would say would be an action item that everybody should complete. Once again, we talk about retirement legacy planning. It's always good to consider tax strategies. You know, calculate after tax rate of investment returns. Be proactive with strategies year round. You know, don't wait until you have an issue to then try to figure out, you know, what should I do around my taxes. It's always good to be proactive when we talk about taxes. Understand Social Security is taxed. So if you are taking Social Security early or maybe on time and you still want to continue to work, you know, you need to look at those limits to see how, you know, how that may impact, you know, because your if you do make enough income, Social Security can be taxed. So then, you know, it begs the question, should I be working this much? Should I not? And then lastly, consult a tax professional before making any large purchases. Another important part of retirement, I think sometimes that gets a little bit lost in the shuffle, is just monitoring and adjusting. A lot of times people go into retirement and they have a plan, and then the plans just run. And because it hasn't really been, and they haven't had any hiccups, they don't think to check. But you should always be checking, always be monitoring adjustments as needed. When we talk about balancing routine and adventure. So when we talk about striking a balance between these two is very crucial. Spontaneity can add excitement to retirement, but maintaining some structure and consistency can provide stability. Consider how you can integrate both familiar routines and exciting new endeavors into your daily life. So, you know, if you're going to take on something new, do something different, you want to make sure that, you know, you're reviewing your retirement to see how that will impact you. Stress test your portfolio. Stress testing your portfolio involves simulating various financial scenarios. Consider how your investments will perform if the market took a downturn or if you face unexpected expenses. This practice helps you prepare for potential changes and adjust your investment strategy accordingly. Also gives you peace of mind as well, because you would know, like, hey, if the market goes here, I'm okay. I still can continue to do the things that I've been doing. Or it might say, hey, if the market goes this low, hey, I have to tighten my belt a little bit and I can't, you know, take these trips like I used to. And if it goes up, you know, then maybe vice versa. But it's very, very important to, you know those numbers instead of just guessing, or instead of, you know, being so driven by what's going on. You know, you can have that peace of mind. And this last one, I would say, is a little hidden and a lot of people never really think about. But if you do have, you know, 401k, IRA, you know, compare the advisor fees and brokerage fees. So even like Robinhood and different things like that, your retirement's probably not in there, but a lot of these services have built-in fees, built-in transactions that you may not see. And especially if you have like a financial advisor that's attached to your portfolio, it's very, very important that you look over the fees periodically, because a lot of times when changes are made to those, they come on the statement. And nowadays not a lot of, and people who look at their statement, they usually look for the transactions and what's clear. They don't read through all that fine print and verbiage. So a lot of times financial institutions are making changes and it's in that fine print and verbiage, but because nobody is reading it, next thing your brokerage fee went up by 0.25%, and you didn't notice it, but you didn't notice your portfolio is not growing the same. And a lot of times what you can do, whether you're in retirement or about to go into retirement, it's something I always recommend is, you get two different places, and what you do is go to one and you get a quote for their services, and then you take that quote to the other one and let them look through it and see what they can do, because they're going to everybody wants to earn your business in your retirement. So a lot of times they'll poke holes in the fees and explain them to you because they're going to want to earn your business, and then you can go back vice versa. And really that can help you have an understanding of the fee structure that they have. I wanted to take a moment and really touch on this. Once again, I do work in banking. So to me, it was very, very important that somewhere along these workshops that I just touch on like scams. It seems so simple. A lot of people feel like, now I would never get caught up, in these, but I can just tell you day after day after day, people are losing hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars to scams, and just straight out scams. And one thing that people don't realize is nowadays with so much done electronically, whether you do online or different things like that, it's always a danger sometimes. I tell people, when you don't do online, because you don't know how it works, so now you are more susceptible to getting scammed because you don't know about the text verification codes. You don't know about, double authentication. You're not really up on Face ID. So now if you caught up in something and all these things are happening, the person on the phone is just explaining it away, but you don't understand what's going on. So sometimes it is a danger for those who like, I'm not doing anything online. I see they usually get scammed. But just to touch on some of these, you had a romance scam, which, a lot of times, and I would say some of these, you can look out for friends and family, with some of these, it may not be you, but you may be able to identify, these. But romance scam is exactly what it, what a lot of times on Facebook, social media, different places like this, someone pretending to be in a romantic relationship, and they begin to, give you a hard luck story about money. You begin to send them, and it usually starts small, $20, $30, and then it begins to escalate up. We have the imposter scam. That's where, once again, with social media nowadays, you have someone pretending to be someone else. They could be selling a product. They could be an old friend. A lot of times that happens with old friends. Say, hey, I'm on hard times. Could you send me $100? And there's Facebook. Everything looks legitimate, or they have a phone number or have some type of imposter. Like I said, it can be individual, it can be a business as well. Employment scam is another one as well. As everybody know, like when you have to apply for a job nowadays, a lot of that is done online. So a lot of times people can be intercepting that, sending you back money. I would tell you, if you do get something, it's really no free money out here. So like if you get paid for work you haven't done yet, that's automatically a red flag. But a lot of times if you do get a check and you take that to your bank, a lot of times they can, review the features and let you know, hey, is this a good item? But if you get it and you haven't done any work, or for any of these, if they're giving you money and asking for money back, I always tell people that's a red flag. Why would somebody give you money and then ask for it back? Usually they would just take out what they're owed, and then send you the rest. So that's always said, people like, hey, they be like, hey, we sending you a check for 2,000, but we need you to send us 500 back. A lot of times that's like point on for a scam. This one I'll tell you really, really gets people is tech support. So, you have things that pop up, Microsoft, McAfee, and you begin to call these numbers and you get on, and what ends up happening is these fraudsters now can remote into your computer. And for most of us who have a lot of different passwords, your passwords may be saved on your computer. So then now, because they have access to your computer, they're going into your bank account, they're moving money around. They usually say something to the effect of, hey, we meant to charge you $49.99. We accidentally charged you $499. We need you to send that money back. And that money is coming from your account. So they get very intricate, but tech support is a big one because, like I said, a lot of times they access your computer, and then if they access your computer and then go into your online banking, usually the financial institution may not be as supportive on that type of scam because they're not going to be able to tell if it's you or not because it's coming off of your computer. So you have to be careful. We got investment scams. That's another one, huge one where everybody, not everybody, but most people want to make money, or want to grow their money, and then you have people preying on that. So that's you have to be careful when we talk about investments, looking at the track record, the history, the reviews. Then we have the grandparent scam as well. That comes in many different forms, whether that's people reaching out to older people trying to say, hey, your grandson has been arrested. Hey, if you don't send us the money right now, hey, he's gonna be in jail for 10 years. Different things like that. That can be a part of that grandparent scam. So I always say, when you're getting these calls and the person on the other side of the phone is really pushing you in urgency, it's good to step away and really think about it. I will tell you a lot of these scams too, a lot of times they coaching up people on what to say. So, whether that's to the bank representative, whether that's the family, a lot of times they coaching them on what to say. But it's just seen too many people lose, their money just making one wrong decision. And usually most of the time when I'm talking to them after the fact, there was always a point where they say, hey, I knew something wasn't right, but they got the gift cards and they gave them the number, or they put money in the Bitcoin machine, and all of these things that happen. And like I said, if you're at the point where you're like, hey, I'm good, I know these are coming, think about the people around you, the people you talk to, because they could be, potential to have one of these things happen. Got my contact email here again. Like I said, this email I created just in case anyone has questions. I'm gonna leave some time at the end just to answer questions as I usually do. But with this email, if you have more of a private question or if you want to set up some time to talk, I'll be more than happy to help out anyone in any way I can. Or say if I don't have the answers, usually I can get you to a resource or get you someone who can answer the question. But wanted to provide this email here just for people to use for contact. And last but not least, just thank everyone for attending. I really enjoyed, these workshops over the last 3 weeks. I've also, had some great refreshers, even had some learnings in preparation for this. And it's one thing I've learned, with these finances. Man, it's a lot of different ways to do, your finances. And I just harping back on this, to me, the biggest thing is just take action and move towards what you would like or what you want or what you feel like you deserve or you earned. And don't just sit stagnant, and because you can get paralysis by analysis by just looking through all of these things. It's better to just pick something, take action, and then reevaluate from there. But I did just want to thank everyone. I always say that I don't take it lightly, everyone's time, taking time away from family, taking time away from dinner. Wednesday is Bible study night, so now some people have to go back and listen to that. So I just want to sincerely say thank you for your attendance. And I left myself a little bit of time for some questions. So if you have anything, you can put it in the chat. I'll start from there. And then we'll get into just some open questions. Let me see. Since I got in late, the slides should be available online through the church YouTube, which the presentation as well. Yes, this is Nancy. POD on your account, so very important. Brokers definitely have fees, and a lot of times they're not just on there for you to see so clearly. A lot of times you have to like really dig in and really have to ask to see what fees, and so a lot of times you just like come out flatly and ask like, what fees are you charging? Like, how much does this charge? And a lot of them, because of their role, they're very candid because they, can't take complaints and different things like that, and it can hurt their business. So a lot of times they're very candid and they'll tell you the fees, but then they'll try to, focus on the service that they provide, which is okay, but the disclosures of the fees, is very, very important so you can compare because, those numbers are sometimes small, but they eat away at your portfolio. There have been reports of fake jobs listed on LinkedIn 100%. Fake jobs are popping up everywhere. LinkedIn, Indeed, you name it. If there's legitimate jobs posted, or usually if there's money involved and there's people doing legitimate business, there's people who are doing not legitimate business and trying to solicit and take advantage of people. Any other questions? That looks like that's all in the chat. Does anybody have a question that maybe is not able to utilize the chat?
Good evening, everyone. I can utilize the chat, but it's easier for me to speak than to type all the words that I have to say. And
Sure.
yeah, and you spoke about different ways that if you are retired, there are different ways that you can increase your income. And I just want to warn everybody that when you do, if say like if you have retired and you go back out and you get a little part-time job, be very careful about how much money you are making because it can put you in a different tax bracket and Uncle Sam will come after you with a vengeance. They don't want you to make a lot of money. I've experienced that this year because out of all the years that I have worked, I've never had to pay money back to Uncle Sam. But this year, I'm retired and I do work a little part-time job doing the same thing that I've always done in education. And now I have to pay back a fee. I'm not pleased with that. So I just want to warn the people to be careful. If you do decide to get a little part-time job, make sure that your part-time job is taking out the right amount of taxes so you don't have to pay back. I just wanted to share that from my experience this year.
Yeah, thank you, Sister Nancy. You spot on with that because what can end up happening as well is you cannot tax that job correctly and owe
Right,
more taxes on that. And then if you make even too much, then your Social Security can turn into income and be taxed. So now, you can go from, getting Social Security with no tax ramifications to now you getting taxed on your Social Security and being taxed from the income of that job, which you could go, like you said, Sister Nancy, from owing nothing for years to like now, owing a considerable amount of money, and and all you were trying to do is make money, but now you made money to owe money. So and a lot of times I think it's a number. So if you look it up, it's a number that you can look up and it'll tell you how much you can make. But then with that, you have to be monitoring it as you go through and as you work. Because a lot of times, like you said, Sister Nancy, you might get a part-time job and maybe they need you to stay a little bit late, or maybe they need you to come a little bit early, and now, you put more hours in than you think you are. So you spot on, you gotta not only know that amount, but you gotta be checking your stub, on a regular basis to see how much you're exactly making. Because
right,
like I said, a part-time job could end up, so you could work an extra 100 hours in a year without even trying, and now you pushed yourself into that situation.
right. And Social Security will give you a breakdown on how much money you can make without having to go over and exceed the amount of money where Uncle Sam will not interfere.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yeah, be careful with that for all, well, I don't think anybody up here is retired except me. I'm looking at them. They're all babies. But anyway, that's just something to think about in the future.
Thank you,
If you,
Sister Nancy. Yeah, you spot
you
on with that. You spot on. Let's see, we got one. Let me see. To add a POD to your bank account, so you suggest going into the bank branch. I would say if in some places you could do it, some banks you could do it online. I know like a lot of investment accounts. You can do it online. I don't really think it makes a difference whether you do it online or in person. I would say a lot of times it now becomes on your bank statement. You can just verify it's done. But I don't think it matters if you do it online or in person. If you can't figure out how to do it online, I would suggest then, of course, going in and doing it or reaching out to your financial advisor. And I also recommend if you do have to go into any bank, try to make an appointment because just like many businesses now, banks not staffed like they used to. So I always tell people when I talk to them, I like to be respectful of your time. And if you like on your lunch break or if you're on the off day, I like to make sure we can take care of what you need. So I recommend if you do have to go into a bank, you can call them and make an appointment. You can go online, make an appointment. But if you know, like, hey, I'm gonna take time out and I want to do this today, make an appointment to make sure they have someone there that can help you. Because I said the way it is now, you could be sitting around for an hour, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and then they gotta actually do the work. So it could just be a lot of time wasted just by not setting an appointment. But once again, just to answer your question, um, some places you could do it online, but if you don't see it, you could definitely go in and they can add it on there for you, give you the paperwork. What information you need, usually you need that person's name, address. If you're dealing with the TOD and brokerage stuff, sometimes they need the social. Sometimes it's recommended for the POD, you get the social, but it's usually not a requirement for the bank accounts. But I'll say name, address, phone number, email. The more information you have, the better. But with bank accounts, you don't have to have as much. With brokerage, you may need the social of the individual. And also too, to let anyone know, you can do multiple people usually. So if you do have like 3 kids and you want them just to split it 3 ways, you can put all 3 on there. If you have one person, you can put one. You can put, a niece and a daughter. It's up to you how you do it. But I will say, if you do multiple people, they split whatever is there by the number of people. So if you have 4 people, everybody get 25%. If you have three, 33. So just keep that in mind as well. So sometimes, I'll see if somebody with 3 kids and one kid is, living there waiting on them hand and foot. And then, when parent passes, now everybody's splitting the money, and then one kid is like, well, I've pretty much been doing everything. So, different ways you can do that, you can do it account specific as well. So if you have 3 different accounts, you can have, your PODs and TODs set up 3 different ways on each account, so that's something as well, just information. Does anybody else have a question today? Like I said, it might have been too much to type, that you just want to ask. You can definitely got a couple more minutes. All right. So I don't see any more questions coming through. But I do have, one ask that if I could ask everyone here and I could ask, of anyone who may know somebody who attended a different one. If know something that you would like us, or myself to cover next, in regards to finances, whether it's a class, a book club, it's a different topic. If you wouldn't mind, shooting that email today. I'm gonna try to get a survey out. Maybe we can get posted on the announcements. But if you, have something that you feel like making benefit or something that you want to hear about, because me and Pastor, we've been talking about, where do we go from here? And I would, I'm definitely up to do something else, but I would like to do something that just would add value and just add impact. So if anybody has any ideas, you can shoot me the email. You can let me know at church on Sunday. You can reach out to Pastor. He can get to me. Life insurance is a good one. Maybe we can have somebody come in. I'll put that on the list. But please, if it's something that, you feel like would add value to your life, please let me know and we can, try to put that together because I'm big on, it's so many different things that we could do in the realm of finances. I would love to do something that adds value versus just guessing to just to know.
Brother Ron, when you just said that, I was just thinking, Whole life insurance is so important. I love my whole life insurance policy, and I like the fact that it adds dividends,
Mm-hmm.
money that you can go and take out and don't have to report it to Uncle Sam. It's free money, or you can let it stay there and it can grow. I would encourage everybody that's under the sound of my voice to get you some whole life insurance,
Mm.
because it really, those dividends add up. And if you have children, if you have grandchildren, I have 2 grandchildren. The day that they were born into the world, I went out and I took life insurance policies on them. And now that my oldest granddaughter is older, so what I was able to do was, because at the age that I took it out on her, she will not be able to get life insurance, a life insurance policy on herself at that premium. So I transferred it over to her so she can take, it's just so important, y'all. All I can say, just get you that life insurance that you just mentioned that's a great lesson to have for everybody. Because
Thank you, Sister
it's
Nancy.
wonderful. And it's I look at it as wealth legacy, generational wealth. That's how I look at my life insurance policy, as generational wealth. And it's really wonderful. If you don't have if you didn't get no life insurance policies on your children, do it now and do a whole life. I'm not an advocate of term life insurance policy. I don't know too much about that, but that whole life insurance policy, it works wonderful, and it grows income because it increases in your dividends.
Mm.
I just wanted to add that because you said something about it, and I was thinking the same thing about life insurance.
Yeah, I like that. That definitely, I'm definitely gonna add that to the list of maybe that'll be another workshop. Maybe we can bring a specialist on, to talk about that. So definitely great ad. Thank you so much for mentioning that. We'll put that on the list. But if you got any more, please reach out and let me know. It's 8 o'clock, so I will close this out with the prayer, and then everyone can enjoy their night. Let us pray. Dear Father, which art in heaven. Lord, thank you for allowing us to come together again tonight, Lord. But please open up our mind to the financial knowledge that's available to us, Lord. But please help us execute in your will, Lord, that we may continue to grow in our finances and be good stewards of our money, Lord. But please continue to bless everyone tonight who is on this line, and continue to bless everyone who is unable to make it tonight, Lord. Keep us in your care, Lord. Amen. Have a good night, everyone.
Amen. You too.
Amen. Great lesson, great information. God
Thank you,
bless
Sister Nancy.
everybody.